Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you are connecting us from. Welcome and thank you to those joining us live and to those who will be watching the recording afterwards. Please let us know by typing into the chat box from which country you are joining us from. My name is Özge Özer, and I am the Educational Partnership Coordinator at FIP. I would like to welcome you to the first FIP AIM webinar of 2022. I would also like to welcome our speakers and our moderators, whom I will hand over to shortly. I will facilitate the event together with dear Nilhan Uzman, who is the lead for education policy and implementation at FIP. Please note this event is being recorded and also live streamed on YouTube. You may watch it again from FIP's website. Please note that there will be poll questions so that you may contribute to the webinar and we may feel as if we are in a conference hall instead of a virtual event. Also, please feel free to send your questions through the Q&A box and let us know which speaker should answer your question. We will be picking those questions throughout today's session, and you are welcome to provide feedback to webinars@fip.org. To become a member of FIP AIM, Academic Institutional Membership, you may use this link on the bottom or scan the QR code. I will briefly mention about today's program. After I will introduce today's learning objectives, I will hand over to our FIP AIM chair, Pierre Moreau, to do his opening speech and mention about the importance of today, which is International Day of Education. Also, we have three valued speakers from Australia, Turkey, and USA. They will have their presentations for 20 minutes. After each presentation, there will be a Q&A time for 5 minutes, and then we will have the closing remarks by the webinar chairs. The webinar is being organized by FIP Academic Institutional Membership, which is FIP AIM. AIM is the only global network of interconnecting schools of pharmacy and academic pharmacy leaders around the world for communication, collaboration, and sharing ideas around areas of interest related to academic leadership. It supports its members on various areas such as curriculum design and development, education, leadership, experimental education and training, enrollment strategies in pharmacy schools, and etc. I would like to take this opportunity and mention that FIP Annual Congress is going to take place in Seville, Spain this year in October, of course, depending on the travel restrictions and the COVID-19 pandemic. And FIP AIM will organize Global Academic Leaders Forum, which is GALF, for the academic leaders. GALF is FIP AIM's annual meeting platform, and we will have a special theme for this year, and it will be announced soon. Please note that in order for you to join GALF together with your leadership teams, your institution must become a FIP AIM member. If your institution is not a FIP member yet, you may connect us from aim@fip.org and we will contact you to assist for your membership process. Or you may simply use the QR code on this slide. So before I give the floor to the chairs and speakers, I will briefly mention why we are organizing this webinar. During the COVID-19 pandemic, pharmacists supported the community and their patients, and academics supported their students and their academic staff. So it's very important that we raise the issue, not only helping the people around us, but helping ourselves. And from all over the world, even we had different countries, different languages, different institutions. We were and we still are working for one thing in common: to get through this difficult time safe and healthy. And today's session, today's webinar, you will discover the importance of fostering academic resilience for mental health during unprecedented times and beyond, address the necessary reasons to raise mental health awareness among academics for students and workplace, identify institutional strategies in supporting mental health and well-being of academic staff and students, And finally, optimize mental health for academic performance in higher education. With that said, so now I would like to kindly introduce the FIP AIM chair, Pierre Moreau from Kuwait University, Kuwait. Pierre is a great leader who is determined to advance academic leadership in all levels, together with your support. And now he will give you an opening speech about the importance of today, which is International Day of Education. Over to you, Pierre.
Thank you, Özge, for your introduction. As Özge mentioned, today, January 24th, is the 4th UNESCO International Day of Education under the theme, if you can switch to next slide, please, changing course, transforming education. So FIP already has a close relationship with UNESCO with its UNITWIN program, and it felt appropriate for us to be part of this international celebration of education. According to UNESCO's vision, this year's International Day of Education will be a platform to showcase the most important transformations to realize everyone's fundamental right to education. It will generate debate around how to strengthen education as a public endeavor and common good, how to steer the digital transformation, and how to support teachers, and this is the area we will be talking about, safeguard the planet and unlock the potential in every person. So at FIP AIM, we have addressed the digital transformation in several webinars in 2020 and 2021, both from a leadership standpoint and from an educational perspective. Today, we have chosen to focus on the objective of supporting academics, including members of their leadership team. As you know, an academic career is very demanding already, with high expectations in, of course, education and community services. As you know, research has no time limitation. It's a 24/7 endeavor, and young academic staff have to perform at the highest level from the get-go to advance in their career. This makes working 60 to 70 hours quite common, which is not, of course, ideal for work-life balance, especially in young academic staff with young families. So statistics clearly show that even women are disadvantaged in this situation when it comes to an academic career. So of course, mental wellness issues in academia are not something new. But of course, on top of all of that, of all this pressure already felt by the young academic staff and older ones as well, the current years have had a significant impact on educators with the requirement for nearly instant adaptation and change. A lot of pressure has been put on the shoulders of our educators to provide education, just like business as usual. But as you know, business was everything but usual. So maybe this has made us more aware of the importance of well-being and mental health when dealing with this crisis. Of course, the human being is capable of amazing adaptation, but what we can do when some of us fail, sometimes we miss the opportunity to support them as much as we can. So the question, how can we become aware of our colleagues having issues, and how can we support them when we're distant and when maybe we don't meet as often? And also, maybe more importantly, in my opinion as well, is how can we prevent that from happening as much as possible? So these are very important questions that will be addressed today, and I'm really looking forward to the different talks. So a lot of our colleagues had to deal with, in addition to, of course, the pandemic and the ramifications, people died, and these people may be parents of some of our academic staff, grandparents. So they had to deal with personal tragedies, kids staying at home while, their parents were trying to give lectures online. Not always easy to do. So to keep the pharmacy curriculum going. So these are the challenges that were added to the pandemic itself. And of course, so everybody had to kind of suffer during this pandemic, but I think we probably neglected the impact on our academic staff. I think sometimes also on our students, how they were able to cope with this new situation and go through their curriculum, both in the teaching side and the learning side as well. So I think today we will talk about this, and I think it's a very good time as the pandemic is, continuing and relentlessly hitting us again and again, wave after wave. We just hope that it's over. But meanwhile, I think we're all tired and we're all struggling. And I think it's a good time to think about that. One of FIP's development goals, in fact, the first one is about academic capacity. So academic capacity is to bring new academic people in so that we have the right to provide education, quality and quantity. But I think that already there, we should do everything we can to keep them there. So it's not just bringing new people, but taking care of those that are with us already. So I think this is, again, the goal of this webinar. And I'm really looking forward to the speaker's talk. And I encourage you to use the question and answer box to ask your questions and make this event as lively and interactive as possible. So thank you everyone for joining. I wish you a great session. And without further ado, I will introduce our first moderator, co-chair of this webinar, is Toyin Tofade. So Toyin is a dean in the US at a school, it's not written there. I can't remember. Yes, Howard University. So she's been very active within FIP. She was a member of the FIP program committee, and she was named fellow already in 2018, and she continued to be involved, and she's now the president of FIP Academic Pharmacy Section, which regroups several hundreds of academic staff from around the world. And she's, of course, well known nationally in her country, but also internationally. And her current area of focus includes leadership development. So it's great to have her with us today. Academic capacity, which is exactly the topic, and also relationship systems. So Toyin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pierre. Hello, colleagues. How's everybody doing? So glad to see everyone from all around the world. We are so glad to have you today. And I'm excited to be co-chairing this session. You will be meeting my distinguished co-chair at the end. I will be introducing him shortly. But as we move along, I want us to get to meet the presenter so that way you can have a chance to start the learning. So I am delighted to present to you Dr. Betty Exintaris, and she coordinates various undergraduate units at Monash University. And she has received multiple awards, was the recipient of the Accept Gillian Shenfield Educator Award in 2019, awarded a faculty citation for outstanding contribution to student learning. In 2020, she was awarded a faculty team award for a program that enhances learning. And in 21, she was awarded a faculty teaching excellence award. Betty has been awarded Lecturer of the Year by the Monash Student Parkville Association 10 times. She is the resilience lead at the faculty and has an interest in easing transition burden in first-year students, in building resilience in national and international student cohorts, and providing mentorship and professional development for teaching associates. We are so honored to have the presence of Dr. Betty Exintaris, who's Senior Lecturer at Monash University, Australia. Betty, over to you.
Thank you very much. And maybe the next slide, please. So hello, good morning, good evening from wherever you may be joining today. And thank you, Toyin, for the kind introduction. And thanks very much to FIP and the organising committee for the opportunity to present in this special digital event on an extremely important and also current topic. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations on whose land I stand today. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. In today's session, you may be based elsewhere, interstate or internationally, so I pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land from wherever you may be joining us. In my presentation, I'd really like to focus on navigating academia and building resilience in academics, but also students as well. Next slide, please. Before I get into my presentation, I'm very keen to find out about the support programs offered at your institution. I have 2 questions that I'd like you to consider around mental health, resilience, and well-being in both staff and students. So we'll begin to ask those questions now, and I'll make some comments at the end. So the first question that I'd like to ask you is, are you aware of support programs for mental health, well-being, resilience training offered for academics at your institution? So we'll just give you 30 seconds to respond to the question, please.
Remember to select the response that is best, that best describes how you feel about the question. And we will have just a few more seconds. So please select yes, no, not sure, or not offered at my institution with respect to this question. Thank you. All right.
Okay, so it looks like there's a bit of a mix there, Toyin. So yes, no, not sure, and not offered at my institution. Okay, great. Thank you very much. As I said, I'll make some comments at the end. And now for the second question, please. So are you aware of support programs for mental health, well-being, resilience, training, etc., offered for students at your institution? So again, yes, no, not sure, or not offered at my institution.
All right, colleagues, you have about 30 seconds to complete this one as well. We thank you so much for your active participation in this webinar.
Okay, so again, quite mixed. So the majority are yes, some no, some not sure, and a few with not offered at my institution. So thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. So if you do have support programs for academics and students, that's fantastic. And I hope that this presentation gives you some additional ideas. And if you don't have any support programs for academics and students, I hope that this presentation gives you some food for thought. And if you're interested in collaborating, please email me. I'd love the opportunity to chat some more. Next slide, please. So in terms of the learning objectives for this digital event, I will address learning objectives 1, 2, and 3. Next slide, please. So this is a brief outline of my presentation. I'd like to talk about resilience and well-being and the challenges that academics face. I'd like to talk about individual and also personal strategies to build resilience and support well-being. I'll talk about some local faculty and global initiatives to support academics and professionals. And then I'd like to shift the focus to students and talk about resilience and well-being and the challenges that our students face, and some local faculty initiatives to support students as well before concluding. And I should say that the views I'll be presenting today are my own. Next slide, please. So I'd like to begin by saying that the critical role of resilience for academic staff is advocated by numerous groups in the literature, such as Gu and Day and Holdsworth et al., who highlight that to teach and to teach at one's best over time requires resilience. And furthermore, that staff need to role model resilience to our students. Today's academic faces many challenges. Administrative overload. Over the last 2 years with the global pandemic, online learning and the accompanying administrative load has increased, and often with less administrative support. We have large student cohorts, which is positive, but it does add to workload. In Australia, in many institutions, domestic student numbers have increased to counteract the decreasing number of international full fee paying students. There are time constraints. During the global pandemic, working hours increased exponentially with the added pressure on the academics to plan online activities to ensure that the activities were interactive, to cater to the different needs of different and diverse student cohorts, to respond to student emails as soon as possible in order to alleviate anxiety and stress, etc. There's been decreased financial support. Grant funding is harder to obtain in Australia. I'm sure that's all over the world. Less than 10% of applications are funded by the National Health and Medical Research Council in Australia. Over the last 2 years, funding for teaching support has also decreased. There's bias in terms of gender, culture, LGBTIQA+. There are programs in place to educate and support individuals, but having said that, for example, senior management at institutions still tend to be male dominated. And then there's balancing academic well-being with student pastoral care. And this point is particularly challenging. If we think of the analogy of the instructions that we're given on a plane, if there's an emergency, put the oxygen mask on yourself before your child. But we haven't really been doing that. We're very conscious of how the pandemic has affected our students, often without taking the time out to help ourselves. And of course, without the reward of travel, which I love. So next slide, please. Early career academics face additional challenges. Handover is often training on the job, which can cause feelings of stress and anxiety. Early career researchers tend to be pulled in multiple new directions. For example, they may be used to concentrating on research only, and then they acquire a teaching load and the huge administrative load that accompanies it. They might have to coordinate a subject with 200, 300, 400, 500 students. As a result, they may struggle to adjust and balance their new roles. And particularly if they're female academics who have a family or are pregnant or with young children or are planning a family. And this can lead to feelings of being overwhelmed, overburdened, stressed out, isolated, and unmotivated. Next slide, please. So last year, I partnered with 2 amazing early career researchers to collaborate on various education grants on the topics of resilience and also international students. So Nilushi Karunaratne from my faculty and Anisha Kaur, who is at our partner institution, Monash University, Malaysia. We've actually written a book chapter together about our experience, which will be published in the coming months, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. So next slide, please. The chapter explores numerous individual and collaborative strategies that build resilience and support well-being. I'd like to touch on some of these topics that are listed on this slide. So for example, one of the early career researchers, Lucia and I, had a daily ritual of a pre-work coffee. So that was at 7 or 7:30 in the morning, and a chat which provided structure and focus to each day. This strategy was really useful to deal with the daily stresses, provide accountability, and provide a positive start to the day. In relaying the tasks for the day, sometimes it even became obvious that the aims for the day were unrealistic. Other times, by verbalizing what we wanted to achieve, we realized that we could help each other. An alternative strategy could be a walk at the end of the day to share accomplishments, talk about the stresses of the day, and to ensure that you're not taking the burden of the day home. Emotional self-care is important. How does the academic achieve everything and still maintain a semblance of a healthy balance of work and home life? The answer is emotional self-care is imperative, and it's imperative to prevent burnout. In order to achieve this, it's important to make deliberate time to spend with family and friends, to continue with recreational activities, even during the busiest times of the semester. In this way, you're looking after yourself and, importantly, bringing your best self to work. Institutions can also play a role in supporting academics by providing a positive and healthy workplace culture. For example, encouraging academics to take annual leave, organising social activities, providing workshops on wellbeing and mental health, and explicitly promoting support services available to academics, such as counselling services and also female support groups. In that sense, it's also important to be supportive of female academics. Women are uniquely placed to form the supportive networks required to build and support their colleagues and be champions of other women. From an experienced educator perspective, the challenge is that women have often struggled to progress to senior positions within the academic landscape, which can in itself cultivate biased attitudes. In a sense, there's potential for bias both ways. So bias experienced by the female academic to progress to leadership positions, and in turn, perhaps a biased attitude from the female academic towards other female academics. So for example, I did it tough, and that's the way it is for female academics. Women need to be champions of other women by being mentors and nurturing the development of early career academics. So there's a cultural shift in such biased gender-based attitudes. And I might add that at my faculty, there are some fantastic female leaders. Next slide, please. Finally, a powerful strategy to build resilience is to cultivate positive relationships, such as mentor-mentee relationships or supportive collegial relationships in academia, which can provide support, guidance, and motivation, and allow early career academics to engage and observe experienced academics to assist them in developing skills and knowledge. Such relationships are also essential for well-being by providing emotional sounding boards, orientation in the workplace, and also providing networking opportunities. For the experienced academic, this form of partnership provides them with an alternative point of view, energy, and also enthusiasm, as well as an emotional sounding board. Interestingly, our observations really complement the literature, which demonstrates that we shouldn't be thinking of resilience as an inherent personal trait. Both internal factors and external resources can help individuals to manage difficulties and bounce back quickly and efficiently, to persevere and thrive, which I know that Ilke and particularly Neil will be talking about later. Next slide, please. I mentioned being a champion of other women earlier in my presentation, and I'd like to tell you about a local initiative at the Faculty of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences that strives to do just that. Her Research Matters. Support groups such as Her Research Matters are crucial for breaking down gender bias and providing females with the tools to work towards promotion, leadership, and management positions. This initiative was founded by Drs. Karen Gregory and Lauren May, who received a Monash University Vice-Chancellor's Award in the area of diversity and inclusion in 2021 for this program. Her Research Matters promotes, sponsors, and fosters an inclusive and equitable leadership environment to enable all women in research to reach their full potential. Her Research Matters aims to amplify, support, and enhance the existing research achievements and excellence of its members, and provide a clear conduit for early career researchers to identify role models within their field. Next slide, please. I'd also like to highlight a global initiative for pharmacy professionals and academics, GRIT. GRIT was founded in 2019 by Associate Professor Karen Whitfield from the University of Queensland in Australia, after a workshop she delivered on resilience at the Monash Pharmacy Education Symposium at Prato in 2019. As you can see from this slide, the group includes a global star-studded cast. I feel very fortunate to be part of this amazing group. We published our first paper last year, and I'll tell you a little bit more about GRIT on the following slide. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the group is to learn and share ideas and to provide a support network to those interested in developing a greater understanding of resilience in the pharmacy profession. As of last year, we have a website, gritfarm.com, again under the directive of the wonderful Karen Whitfield. The website not only looks great, but has a variety of resources, podcasts, and blogs on the topics of resilience and emotional intelligence, balance, and burnout. The Grit Twitter account is pretty active thanks to Professor Kyle Wilby. The Twitter handle is @gritfarm, one word. If you get a chance to read the paper that will tell you more about the group and purpose of GRIT And do look up the website. It has some wonderful resources. Next slide, please. Now, just briefly, I'd like to talk about some local initiatives at the Faculty of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences at Monash University for 2022. So Her Research Matters, which I talked about earlier, mental health and wellbeing training, which is strongly encouraged for new teaching staff, as well as our skills coaches. Unfortunately, I don't have time to talk about the skills coaching program in more detail here. Another initiative is Empowering You 2022. Myself and Alicia Karinaratne will run a series of events for our faculty for 2022. The events will alternate between fun wellbeing activities such as yoga, cooking classes, origami, pot planting, and specialized presentations focusing on resilience, mental health for academics, mindfulness strategies, how to prevent burnout, etc. The invitation will be open to academics and students as well. The first session will be a cooking class that we will run the week after next, and any suggestions for a recipe, please let me know. We will also provide training for national organisations. We will be running a resilience workshop for the Continence Foundation of Australia annual conference in May to get the conversation started about resilience. So now I'm going to change the focus from academics. Next slide, please. Today's students face many challenges, including transition burden as they move from secondary school to university, where they transition to becoming self-directed learners, where the onus is on them, stress with their studies, being in a competitive environment, no longer being the best of the best, as they might have been at secondary school, social pressure, which is probably exacerbated by social media, technology overload, technology both within and outside the classroom. In Australia, many of our international students encounter additional difficulties and challenges at a university level, including English language barriers, cultural differences, feelings of loneliness and isolation, financial hardships, and education system differences. Next slide, please. Current support at the university for students include administration services, societies and study support, and student-led campus programs. There have been some local faculty initiatives to foster student wellbeing and support both within and outside the classroom, such as resilience workshops for our fourth-year students, where we supply them with resilience diaries to keep the topic of resilience front of mind during the year, upskilling future leaders such as student ambassadors, Dean Scholars students, advanced honours students, which are all high-achieving students that are not always equipped to deal with when their resilience is challenged. For example, reframing what success means for them, teamwork, growth mindset, positive thinking, teaching students about teamwork and not just expecting them to work effectively in a team, having a conversation about being flexible in your thinking, having a growth mindset and the power of positive thinking. And finally, our academic-led PIES initiative, specifically for international students, which I'd like to tell you more about on the next slide. So PIES stands for Parkville International Exchange Students. My fantastic colleagues, friends and co-leads, Nalusha Karinaratne and Suzanne Califf and I designed, developed and implemented this program in 2020, which focuses on creating an inclusive campus community environment for international students at Monash's Faculty of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences through an academic-led student engagement program. We work closely with the Senior Student Experience Officer and the Parkville International Student Association. We developed a program that focused on providing support through three key areas: communication, social and networking, and wellbeing. We identified these areas by surveying the students in 2020. So these areas were identified as being important, not only by us, but also by the international students themselves. The program was designed to include a series of international student engagement activities, a quarterly newsletter, and a central email as a unique port of call for academic support. We have run greater than 40 events during and between semesters over the last 18 months. In the evening, Australian time, so that we could capture as many international students as possible at a reasonable time given the time difference with Australia. The positive feedback has been overwhelming, and I'd like to share some quotes with you. Next slide, please. So at the end of 2021, we had a PASS leader send us an email about some positive feedback that she heard about PIES. So PASS is a support program for first-year students, and Edris Chan, one of our senior students, who is also a PASS leader, let us know that many of her international students had mentioned how the PIES program made their first-year experience more enjoyable, gave them opportunities to practice skills and space to create friendships. It's really fantastic to receive feedback like this and to know that PIES is able, in Edris's words, create a space and community that international students can go to without feeling afraid that they will not fit in. Next slide, please. This year, we received an email from an international student, Kent, who was learning remotely from Indonesia the entire year in 2021. That was his first year experience. He has now arrived in Australia and is eager to begin his second year on campus. In his email, he mentions that the support program PIES has been his support system for going through this pandemic, and that PIES really helped him and encouraged him to continue his studies. This is fantastic. We have also received funds from the university to roll this program out across 6 Monash faculties and also 2 schools at Monash, Malaysia in 2022. And we've also received a number of local awards for this initiative. Next slide, please. So regarding our plans for 2022, we will continue to upskill our future leaders. We will continue teaching teamwork, and we will continue our PIES program. And lastly, along with Nalushika Naratne, Anisha Kaur, Kirsty Galbraith, and Annie Chen, we will scaffold a resilience curriculum across years 1 to 4 of our undergraduate pharmacy program, as well as run and support a workshop in Monash, Malaysia on the topic of resilience, which will be accompanied with resilience diaries. In this way, we hope to upskill the students such they have the necessary tools to deal with the challenges that they will face as professionals. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, strategies to build resilience are more important than ever. And it's imperative to support the well-being and mental health of academic staff and students, both within and outside the workplace and classroom, especially during trying times when our resilience has been challenged, such as those we're experiencing during the pandemic. Initiatives that we should maintain beyond 2022 and well beyond the pandemic. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so very much for that presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. There is a little bit echo. Would you try now? Toyin, can you hear me?
Thank you so very much for that presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, it's okay now.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I just wanted to thank you for that presentation. We're going to listen to some of the questions that might exist at this time. And Neil Hand, please help us to identify if there are any questions in the chat at this point.
Thanks, Toyin. Betty, it was a great presentation. Thank you very much. Also, we are grateful to have you amongst our FIP AIM membership. Monash University greatly supports other universities for such initiatives as well. Toyin, I scanned, there are 5 interesting questions, but for the sake of time, I'll combine one, and then perhaps both Betty and other speakers may address directly from the Q&A as well. So one of the question is, Betty shared about students building resilience, supporting students for them to build resilience. And at the same time, in some countries,
some of the students are not able to go to the campus as well. So one of our attendees has asked, is building resilience is sufficient for students that are unable to go to the campus, so when there is no FaceTime with academics? So are there any particular views on that? And there is a direct question to Betty about grit being applied to non-pharmacy faculty members as well. So some of the questions may be asked directly answered from the Q&A. So I'll raise the one about students and them being not having FaceTime with their lecturers.
Yes, thank you very much, Neil. Certainly in terms of the workshops that we've run in the past on the topic of resilience, they have been face-to-face, and certainly when they are face-to-face, I think they can be more interactive. You can walk around to the different groups and ask them what they're talking about, ask them when has their resilience been challenged, what did they do, how do they think they can build resilience, and then talk about some resilience strategies, and that works really well. And of course, because you're talking about a topic that's related to the students, they love it. And there's a real buzz in the air, most definitely. However, in the last 2 years, we have run our resilience workshops online, actually. So that, perhaps isn't as ideal as being able to do it face-to-face, but it still works really, really well. So I think it is possible.
All right. Well, thank you so very much for that response. Nilhan, are there any other questions for Betty?
I think we can pick another one as well. So I'll combine two questions. This is relevant to mental health and resilience for academics as well. So there is the one of the questions we received was from our attendee asking that there is a publication pressure, not only in pharmacy schools, but in business schools as well. So this exists. So depending on this pressure, some schools are unable to look after their staff and their well-being. So how this can be managed from the academics perspective. So is there any specific initiatives to relieve such stress? And the other one of our attendee again asked if the mental health and resilience approach has been the same for full-time and contractor or temporary staff in the university. So I combined two questions for now.
Yes, so firstly, in terms of pressure, definitely. I'm in a very research active faculty at a very research active university. So certainly there are pressures to publish and all the other stresses and pressures that I mentioned as well. But I do think, and again, my personal view, it's very important to look after ourselves. And I'm saying that because I wasn't necessarily very good at that myself last year. Very worried about looking after the students, very worried about how they were going, organizing lots of, additional sessions outside of work hours. And, that worked really, really well. But I think what came from that is, for me, it's very important to still make time for family and friends and to do those recreational activities, to go for a walk and not to put those sorts of things off. So I think that's very important. The other thing is, as I mentioned, having initiatives like I was saying with a colleague, we'll be running Empowering You in 2022. That's open to everybody. So that's open to part-time academics, casual, full-time academics. It's open to our students. Want to capture as many people as possible. And that might be something simple and a simple idea, but at least it's a message once a month to remind you to look after yourself. And that's why we're also deliberately and strategically alternating really important topics like resilience and mental health, etc., with fun activities. So it's not always, information, overload. We will run a yoga class. There was mention of doing a Zumba class. As long as I'm not running it, I'm happy to be part of it, or a cooking class, etc. So those small things, they're small things, but in a sense, they're big things. And I think those sorts of things and can really help to look after ourselves. And also other things like, encouraging, for those in leadership positions, encouraging our staff to have some annual leave, to take some time out, to have that annual leave and actually have a break, not annual leave and then continue being on email the whole time. So they're all small things, but I think they're big things, and it really speaks to looking after ourselves, bringing our best selves to work, and therefore, in that case, we can also really look after our students as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing some more from you when we meet, hopefully at Sevilla, COVID-19 protocols permitting. At this time, I think it'll be good for us to introduce and get to meet my illustrious co-chair. I am so honored to have our co-chair with us. And thank you again, Betty, for that wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Mohammed Rayal is Dean of Lebanese International University and is also an AIM Advisory Committee member. His focus is in pharmaceutical chemistry and is member in a number of regional and international organizations in pharmacy education. The Arab Association of Colleges of Pharmacy, the ACP ISP Advisory Group, American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy, Arab American Pharmacy Educators, and Lebanese National Pharmacy Accreditation Committee. Please give a warm welcome for my co-chair, Mohammed Rayal. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, my colleagues, and I wish you a happy educational day. This is the aim of today's webinar, to make you happy, or at least to help you be happy during your education. Next slide, please. Our next distinguished speaker is Dr. İlkay Yıldırım from Turkey. She's an associate professor in Istanbul University, Faculty of Pharmacy, Department of Pharmacology. Dr. Yıldırım graduated from Istanbul University, Faculty of Pharmacy, summa cum laude, as the highest distinction. She has been granted as a postgraduate fellow at Yale University School of Medicine, Department of Pharmacology, between years 2004 and 2005 in a frame of her PhD thesis, and received her PhD degree in pharmacology from Istanbul University Faculty of Pharmacy in the Department of Pharmacology in 2007. As a visiting scientist, she has been at University of Washington School of Medicine, Department of Medicine, Division of Cardiology in year 2016. She has a scientific background with specific training and expertise in cardiovascular research, focusing on endothelial cell function, signal transduction under normal and physiological conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, and preeclampsia. Please welcome Dr. Yıldırım, and Dr. İlkay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rahal, for this nice introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. And so I'm very glad to celebrating International Day of Education here with you, and I appreciate FIP Organizing Committee for this nice meeting and invitation. So I will talk about bidirectional feedback between students and academics, how it is promoting better mental health and resilience during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. So, and we know that COVID-19 was something new for us, the pandemic. We all felt the fear of unknown, and we step outside our comfort zone. So it makes us anxious and more depressed. And the average share of adults reporting symptoms of anxiety disorder or depressive disorders are increased fourfold between 2019 January and June, and January 2021, just after 1 year after the pandemic. And younger adults are more likely to report symptoms of anxiety and depressive disorder during COVID-19 pandemic, and the rates are even double in age between 18 and 24 compared to age 65 plus. Next slide, please. So probably you are aware with World Happiness Report. It's a publication of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Next slide, please. And the World Happiness Report, according to the World Happiness Report 2021, and it has been asked 156 countries. So did you experience enjoyment during a lot of the day yesterday? And Turkey, my country, was on the, unfortunately, at the top, bottom of 5 on number 2. It seems that we did not have that much pleasure in 2021. Next slide, please. On the other hand, so we are on the top 5 by experiencing anger. We are on the number 2. Next slide, please. Again, we are on the top 5 by experiencing stress. So Turkey was very stressful and with less pleasure and more anger in the last year, like most of the countries. Next slide, please. So Turkey has the largest higher education student population in European higher education, with almost 200 universities. More than half is a state university, and nearly 8 million students, 3 million associates, 4.5 million bachelors, 300,000 masters, and 100,000 doctoral students. Next slide, please. And on the March 2020, the universities in Turkey suspended face-to-face teaching, and education was rapidly replaced by digital online formats. And it was an analysis as reported about the impact of online education during COVID-19 pandemic in Turkish higher education. Next slide, please. And this analysis is showing us that almost 70% of the students got online courses, which was conducted every week or in some certain weeks. And 60% of the students get course materials and documents shared on the digital platforms. Only 2-3% of the students had face-to-face education, which carried out in the classroom. And our students are reported that this is the most of the source of their stress, anxiety, and depression, because they do not prefer mostly online education. So the evaluation method for the online education was mostly online tests and written exams. Almost 80% of the students got online tests, and it was a big problem in our university because universities and faculties want to use cameras during the online exams, but our students expressed their feeling on Twitter account, and they said it's very stressful and it's against our private life, and we refuse to use cameras. So it was a big advantage for them, and they got very high points. Next slide, please. And so if they have been asked, the students, about their preferences, how to conduct education after pandemic, and 46% of the students, they said, should be completely face-to-face in classroom, and almost 30% of the students says it should be completely online, whereas 25% of the students says it should be blended, both online and face-to-face. And if you're looking the distribution of the field of the students, the distribution is very similar between students from science and engineering, or arts, or health sciences, or social sciences. Actually, we have been expected that health science students prefer more face-to-face education, but it seems that social science students, even they expected more face-to-face education. Next slide, please. So if we are looking from the academician perspective, half of the academicians express that they had a more difficult communication with students during the online education, and it is very anxious and stressful. On the other hand, the half of the academicians mentioned that no change between online and face-to-face education, or it's even easier for them. And what was the challenge with the online education? It has been asked to academicians, and that's that there wasn't a serious difficulty in general. It was 64% of the academician. On the other hand, 35% of the academician mentioned that they have some difficulties, like distance educational platforms, student participation, and could not carry out courses efficiently enough. And I am in this group because I am an academician and pharmacology. And it's, for me, it's not good, and I don't find it very efficiently to contact my health professional students. Next slide, please. So an academician has been asked, what is your preferences for the next summer in 2021? Because it was still the COVID-19 on the air, and 65% of the academician answered the question, it should be completely online. And only 13% answered that it can be face-to-face in classroom. But if they have been asked, what will be your preferences after pandemia? Only 7% of the academician answered it should be online. The rest wanted to have face-to-face education or a blended education. Next slide, please. And it has been a paper published in Frontiers in Psychiatry is showing the anxiety and stress levels associated with COVID-19 pandemic of universities in Turkey a year after pandemic. Next slide, please. So it is shown that female students have more anxiety compared to the male students, and the COVID-19 related anxiety is more dominant in female students, again, compared to the male students. Next slide, please. And so among the students who had COVID-19 related anxiety, they had lost at least one family member due to COVID-19 pandemic, and it was the source of their anxiety to lose a family member. Next slide, please. And if you compare the first grade students, intermediate students, and final grade students, and it has been shown that final grade students have more non-COVID-19 related anxiety. Actually, first grade students, they have more COVID-19 related anxiety, whereas the final grade students have COVID-19 non-related anxiety, like they have anxiety about their career plans. Next slide, please. And also students who had lost a family member during the pandemic, they have more stress, and the stress rate is more prominent in female students compared to the male students. Next slide, please. So I'm working in Istanbul University Faculty of Pharmacy. It's the first faculty in Turkey, and it's built in 839, and I'm both in teaching and also research issue. So my students, my postgraduate students, my PhD students, and my undergraduate students, they have different problems, and their source of anxiety is actually different from each other. Next slide, please. And if you are looking at the factors which are inducing the anxiety, especially for undergraduate students, it was curriculum modification, and because the teaching learning methods and techniques are changed, and lots of them have device support problems. And it wasn't that much easy to participate actively online classroom, because it was starting from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. It was really very disturbing. But on the other hand, the assessment and evaluation was very flexible, like online exams. And actually, so they needed, both academicians and students needed virtual training and motivation for online education during the pandemic. Next slide, please. And we switched our education from amphis and big meeting rooms to the online platforms. Next slide, please. I had almost 200 students in every classroom, and I missed during this time my students a lot. And actually, so when I was on the online education, because pharmacology is starting on the class 2 in our faculty and continue to till the 5th year. So I had a lot of courses and lecture starting from 2nd year to 5th year. So, and I had, during the online education, I had always the background, the famous song of Pink Floyd. And I was like, hello, is there anybody out there? Because I was feeling very, very, lonely, because they are not opening their microphones and they're not opening their cameras. And I was speaking by myself, and it's something really very harmful for our mental health as well. Next slide, please. So I really wanted how they feel inside. I want to hear them, and I really want them to know and feel how I really feel inside. So I start to talk to them during the online lectures. Next slide, please. And I said, say, how is your life? Forget about pharmacology. So we will learn about it. But how do you feel first? And most of them said, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, they said they feel sad, they feel stressful, anxious, confused, and scared, and they feel angry. And I told them that talking people you trust, really, like an health professional or a family member or close friends, and it will be very helpful for you. And I saw that they are aware. They are aware that not everything they hear about the virus may be true, because it makes you also very anxious. And I said, we have to stay updated and use the information from trusted sources like FIP, like WHO, like FDA, or a local health authority. And in order to limiting the worry and agitation, so we need to, spend less time watching or listening media coverages. And actually, it was very helpful for them. Next slide, please. And when I was, starting, especially morning lesson, so when I was waiting for them for the classroom, because some of them are waking up lately, and when I was waiting for them for 5-10 minutes, I'm trying to, put on a music and maybe a soundtrack of a famous movie or series, and I was waiting for the students, and then I was asking, do you know this song? Do you know this soundtrack? Have you seen this movie or series? Oh, this is my favorite. What's your favorite? And sometimes, for example, when I was talking about mental issues and about antipsychotics, antidepressive, I was asking them, do you notice art pieces? It's from Van Gogh. And do you know why yellow color is, dominant in his art pieces? Which herbal medicine is responsible for this? And they were, looking on Google and trying to talk to me. And art connected our life. Music connected our life, and we connected each other. And they started to bring a new art pieces or new soundtrack or new series idea or movie idea to me. And they said, do you know this? Do you know this? And, I watch something from in South Park, and it was completely nice summary what you told us last time about Tourette syndrome. And it was very nice, really, the art and music. and it connected us to each other. Next slide, please. And as we talk about their career plans as well, and because they were very anxious, especially as students on the 5th class. Next slide, please. And the other issue, pandemia, was not only COVID-19. The other spreading thing and very dangerous thing was infodemics. Too much wrong informations make the people very anxious. Next slide, please. And especially about the vaccines, and especially about the virus spreading, and that herbal medicines or vitamins or drugs that they used for treatment of the COVID-19 or boosting the immune system. And I was talking about every news to them, just starting to my lecture about the pharmacology, maybe 10-15 minutes, and I was saying, have you heard about the mRNA vaccines? Have you heard about the new drug opportunity? Have you heard about this? And this is not true. What do you think about that? So please tell your family, tell your friends, tell your relatives that vaccines are very safe, or we should do this. And they were really a good professional during the pandemic about about the infodemics as well. Next slide, please. And I also take very active role for meetings on Zoom, on some other health TVs, and I talk about about rational drug use, about vaccines, about using rational drug use in chronic diseases during the pandemic, because most of people with mental illness or diabetes or hypertension or geriatric people, they didn't go to the hospital because of the pandemic, and they try to take their drugs and supplements from the pharmacy. And my 50 students, they have an internship in the pharmacy as well, and I told them how can they help these people as well. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, yeah. And no, the other one, sorry, previous one. Yeah. And they also give information, and they also inhibit spreading of the infodemics in the community pharmacy as well, why they are doing their internship program as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I need also psychotherapy from them, but when they start to join the online courses, and I feel better, and they reduce my Zoom fatigue really, and because my video was always open, and they start to open their cameras, turn their cameras on as well, and their microphone as well, which makes me feel very comfortable. Next slide, please. Yeah, and in our university, in Istanbul University, hopefully you can find a chance also visit this very nice historical university as well, and our city Istanbul. And we have also an up-to-date information page about coronavirus as well, and our student, both national and international students, can check everything what happened in Turkey and about the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's a very good source for them as well. Thank you very much for listening me, and hopefully so it was a good information for you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yildirim. It was very interesting, and the most interesting thing is to find Lebanon is among the top 3 in everything, the most stressful, most anger in the survey. And this is why we need this webinar. And we learned a lot from you and from the other speakers. Nilhan, is there any question in the Q&A box?
Yes, thank you, İlkay Hocam. It was a great presentation. We received a lot of good feedback from the chat as well. There are many questions, but for the sake of time, I'll pick one, and I'll invite again İlkay and Betty and also Neil after his presentation to answer the questions from the Q&A box. So Ilka has shared many initiatives, engagements with her students by asking some questions before the start, sharing some information. So one of the questions we received was, what was the reaction of the students? How much they were engaged when they were asked these questions? Did they reply? And also a specific question is how you were managing teaching online for something that is more hands-on and practice-based.
Actually, they got very, very happy, and they feel, very precious, because if you are asking them, so how is it your family? Are there anyone that got, COVID-19 in your family? Or if they are okay. And they start to send me also emails after the lectures, and they start to ask me questions, and they start to tell me about what they read last week, a nice, so I think it was a chance for me to contact my students and in other better way. So it was good chance for integration. Their reaction was excellent.
Great.
Any more questions, Dilham? Do we
have
have time, or shall we move to the second?
Maybe a quick one question, and then we can move on to the next one. Just I thought maybe this could be shared with Ilkay as well. So one of the questions comes from our participants, Ahmet Khan Madni, about, for example, New Zealand banning cigarettes, Canada raising campaigns about alcohol. So these addictions also influence mental health of the students. So were there any initiatives about supporting students about such addictions and their impact on their own mental health during this period as well? So that was an interesting question we received as well.
Actually, it's a very nice thing, but not in our university. Very good idea, actually. Congratulations to your university and your country, but not in our university, but in community pharmacies. We had a lot of education, and we told them to tell their patients, try to reduce alcoholism, smoking cigarettes, and other harmful habits. But we didn't do that among our students. Very nice idea.
Again, thank you, Dr. Ilkay, and we'll move back to Dr. Toyin, the co-chair, to introduce the last speaker.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful, Ilkay. That was very insightful, and thank you, Mohammed, my distinguished co-chair. So as we get on to the next presentation, I want to thank everybody for staying along with us. We do have a very, very fascinating presentation coming up from Dr. Neil Mckinnon. He's Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs at Augusta University in the US. He serves as the Chief Academic Officer of the university and oversees 10 colleges and schools, as well as diversity and inclusion, enrollment, student affairs, faculty affairs, institutional effectiveness and planning, instruction and innovation, the registrar's office, and the research enterprise. He also serves on the board of Augusta University Health. He is a tenured professor in the Department of Population Health Sciences in the Medical College of Georgia. Prior to his current position, he was Dean of the Winkle College of Pharmacy at the University of Cincinnati. He was Director of the State Office of Rural Health for Arizona and a professor at the Mel and Enid Zuckerman College of Public Health at the University of Arizona. He also was Professor and Associate Director for Research at the College of Pharmacy at Deloise University in Nova Scotia, Canada. Please, let's give a warm welcome to Neil Mckinnon as he gives his presentation on strategies for deans and other academic leaders to thrive during a pandemic. Over to you, Neil.
All right. Well, thank you, Dean Tafadi, and thank you for staying around, all of you. This last presentation, we've spoken about the pandemic from students and faculty. Now we're moving up and really kind of talking about advice for deans, department chairs, other academic leaders. If you're not in one of those positions, I think this will still be valuable for you. I will be sharing my top 10 strategies on how to survive the pandemic. And so with that, I do have a couple polling questions as well. So we'll open up. And the first one is really a statement to see if you agree or not. My job is less fulfilling now than it was at the start of the pandemic. Yes, no, or not sure, or can't assess.
And colleagues, you'll have about 30 seconds to submit your responses. Thank you so much for your sustained participation in this webinar. All right.
All right. Yeah. So 44% less fulfilling, 34% no, and 22% can't assess. All right. Well, let's move on to the second question then.
Okay.
And this one is, my team has been thriving since the start of the pandemic. Same options, yes, no, not sure, can't assess.
I wish there were some in-between options in that one. All right, colleagues, how has your team been doing during the start of the pandemic? A few more seconds to go.
All right, so half of you no, 35% yes, and 15% not sure, can't assess. So, well, thank you for that, and we'll be kind of following up on that later on this presentation. So next slide, please. I wanted to start with a tweet from a friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Kelly Ginrod on Twitter. And you can see this was just earlier this month. And this was when Canada was in the midst of yet another lockdown. Schools were also had moved to online education. So Kelly's a young mom as well. And you can see what she tweeted: I am out of office. I am not on vacation. I have no childcare and am now responsible for supporting 2 children in online learning. I cannot schedule meetings, provide input in a timely fashion, or meet deadlines. I will respond when schools become essential again. And I don't know if I think it's cut off in the bottom, but if you look at her tweet, she actually had almost 5,000 likes on that tweet. So it certainly resonated with a lot of individuals. So next slide, please. So kind of looking at the polls we just did and looking at Dr. Ginrod's tweet, you could kind of wonder, can we truly thrive during the pandemic, or are we essentially all really in survival mode? And if you look at some of the data presented by the previous 2 speakers, I think it is challenging. We're certainly facing this pandemic together. So is my desire for my leadership team to thrive, is that simply wishful thinking? Am I disconnected from reality? Is it even possible? And those are questions we're going to explore in this presentation. Next slide. I do have a few warning or auxiliary labels that we're familiar with as pharmacists, just as we talk about these 10 strategies. The first, these are really opinion-based. I know as pharmacists, we want to be evidence-based in all we do, but certainly there's not randomized controlled trials to support a lot of the advice I'll be giving. Secondly, I don't claim to be an expert. Certainly, I'm very pleased to be invited by FIP to be part of this panel, but I'm just learning to deal with pandemic along with everyone else. The third point, I actually changed positions halfway through the pandemic. So in 2020, I was a dean of a pharmacy school, as Toyin mentioned, and then left that university, moved to a different state in the United States and a different university to become a provost. And then lastly, I will be sharing some examples. I've changed names to protect confidentiality. So next slide, please. All right, well, let's start with strategy 1. And in this one, I have to admit, some of these, as I present these strategies, some might be perhaps more insightful or novel than others. This one is kind of like maybe a no-brainer. Be proactive with mental health. Be proactive with mental health. And again, we saw clear data, right, from our last speaker on some of the challenges in different countries around the world that individuals are facing. And we know that there's been a rise in suicide, depression, and mental health. And we're not just seeing that in the general population, we're seeing the same things in students, faculty, and staff. I know at my university as well, we've had students that have committed suicide, attempted suicide unsuccessfully, and dealing with other mental health issues. I won't mention which university, but one dean I worked with, his name is Sean, And Sean ended up taking a month's medical leave due to stress and mental health issues. And to me, that was good that he recognized he needed to do that, and certainly supported him in that. But at the same time, I suspect he's probably not the only dean or administrative leader out there who really needs to take some time off. I know when I began this position just over a year ago, one of my first presentations with my cabinet was a interactive presentation on mental health. Just how do we, again, not just survive, but thrive during the pandemic. Last fall, I also asked my entire leadership team to complete suicide prevention training. I completed along with them. Again, how do you identify those signs before someone gets to the point of wanting to take their life? And so my question to you, for each one of you listening, what are you doing in your college or organization to proactively assess your own mental health? So I think Betty mentioned that before, right? Take care of yourself first, but then also be better prepared to help others. Next slide, please. So strategy 2 is also another being proactive activity, this time against the Great Resignation. As you're probably familiar with this term, it's cuts across all countries on the planet right now. We just have people in record numbers that are quitting their jobs, and some actually that are staying out of the labor force completely. The next one kind of shows some of the challenges. You can see 67% of millennials and 81% of Gen Z who left their jobs last year cited mental health reasons. So the top reason being mental health. I think of someone that I worked with. I'm going to call her Marie. So she was promoted to a new position, really enjoyed working with her. And really only about 4 months into that new leadership position, she ended up resigning to leave and go to a different organization that gave her more flexibility as teleworking, and just rethinking her priorities in life, what about her values and what really meant to her. And so the questions I'm going to pose to you, again, for each one of you that are listening: how might you make your workplace more appealing? Can you do a blend, for example, of telework and in-person activities? Can you create more meaningful interactions, right? How do we make our interactions more meaningful? And then finally, how do you kind of find out from your team what they want before people get to the point of submitting their resignation? Next slide, please. Next one, strategy 3 is a career and life planning. I would argue most individuals do not have a career plan, and the few that do often do not align that with their personal life. And this is certainly a time, again, with the Great Resignation, with the pandemic, when people really are reevaluating, reassessing everything, their career, their personal life. And I love this quote: meaningful work where one feels fulfilled occurs when a person's values, needs, passions, and abilities interact synergistically in work. And so this is something that I have a personal interest in. I've done a number of workshops. My very first meeting with my new deans in my position, I did a workshop on career and life planning, and I've done almost a dozen since then across campus. And so I would ask each one of you, do you have a career and life plan, and do your key team members? And if you don't, I didn't ask that, to make you feel guilty or bad, but I will walk you through here on the next 2 slides, kind of a short way to do that. So next slide, please. I would argue there's at least 7 kind of key things that go into a career and life plan. The first one, not surprisingly, is thinking about your career. So for example, some questions you could ask yourself: what action steps do I need to put in place to achieve my career vision and goals? And what is the role of FIP and other academic pharmacy organizations in my career? A second component should be community and citizenship. So what does citizenship mean to you? We come from a variety of different countries. It was really fun to see all the countries where people are from at the start of this webinar. But what does citizenship mean to you? Which community organizations are important for you to support? And how does your career in pharmacy and academia help or hinder you to do this? Third, discretionary time and hobbies. I think actually Betty talked about this, right? The importance of having time for yourself. How are you currently spending your free time, and how would you like to spend it? And how important is it for you to have the ability to choose when you can take a vacation or leave, in the length of that vacation or holiday? Faith, we come from different faith walks in life, but how does your faith direct your purpose in your life? How does your faith support your career choice and activities? And how can you use your skills and talents in pharmacy to act on your faith? Next slide, please. Number 4, finances. How do your financial goals and objectives align with your compensation and career objectives? How might you use your resources to impact pharmacy students in residence. Health, yes, actually having a health plan is part of this. What are your personal health goals? How does your career impact your health? And how could you serve as a role model to your patients and to your students through your own lifestyle choices? And then finally, relationships. I won't read all these questions, but the first one I think is an important one. How does your career impact your relationships with family, friends, and other individuals that are important to you? Obviously, I'm originally from Canada, and this fall was the first time in 2 years that I had the ability to see my parents in person. So where you live, we've learned that during the pandemic, right? Might impact your ability to see your family. So next slide. All right, so we're moving on. I want to share this one quote about relationships. In our final moments, we all realize that relationships are what life is all about. Don't wait until you're on your deathbed to figure out that nothing matters more. And I think we've all realized that, right? During the pandemic, relationships perhaps we took for granted in the past. Now there's folks that perhaps you haven't seen in a long, long time. So next slide, please. So moving on then, strategy number 4, counter social isolation. Now, introverts might be happy, and it's been said that maybe the dogs of the world are happy because now a lot of people are working from home. But I think for many people, we have this social isolation. And I would argue for those of you that are in leadership positions, we already had some of that. It can be lonely as you move on top. And I think the pandemic in many ways has made that worse. If I think of, my own university, I'm obviously the only provost. And so I really don't have a peer to talk to at my university. And so what can you do? I think you can create new affinity groups, you can create networks, you can create mentors for new faculty and also mentors as you're hiring new department chairs and associate deans as well. Some examples of some of those affinity groups that I've tried to create since I've been here. One is what I call VIPs, very important pharmacists. So we actually don't have a pharmacy school at Augusta University, but we have some faculty that are pharmacists. And so I had kind of organized a lunch for them, and we have an email group where we share ideas. I did one for Canadian faculty, research directors, and institute center directors. And then also another way is doing internal tours or visits. Yes, many of us can't travel internationally or even across our country now. So it might be an opportunity for you to spend some time looking at other units, other colleges within your university and learning more about them as well. One thing I've been trying to do intentionally as well is to, again, make sure that I have some social interaction with my peers. And I've done that with the 3 other provosts here in Georgia. So my question to you is, which new affinity groups could you create in your college or organization? And what are you personally doing to counter social isolation? Next slide, please. Next one, strategy 5, take care of your administrative support. And it's been said in the practice of pharmacy, the difference between a good day and a bad day is the quality of your pharmacy technician or assistant. It's probably the same thing if you're in an administrative role, can be the quality of your administrative support. And while our duties have changed, certainly our staff duties have changed a lot as well. And one case study here would be Paula. So she was a long-time administrative associate for a dean. She started working from home with the pandemic. Her duties changed, and it really for her was a struggle of how do you manage kind of her family issues along with her work and just the stress of that caused. Last December, I did a career planning workshop for our administrative assistants for our deans at the university. It was the first time kind of bringing them together and trying to build a sense of community, having them learn from each other. And so questions you can ask yourself, how have you met with your administrative assistant recently to discuss how she or he is doing? What are you doing in a real and compassionate way to support your administrative team? Next slide, please. All right, so next strategy 6, is to approach external events differently. And I'm going to share this quote with you that really kind of hit home for me. I had a dean share this with me, and this person said, everything I enjoyed most about being a dean has been taken away by COVID. And if you think especially dean's roles, a lot of it was going to meetings and conferences, meeting with donors and alums and graduate university, doing professional development, hosting events at their college or school. All of that pretty much shut down the past 2 years. And, it's challenging. If you think, again, the role of dean certainly has changed considerably going back to January 2020. So what you can do sometimes is maybe have a virtual event and then mix that with some meaningful follow-up. And we did that this fall, where we had a 2-day virtual workshop challenging all of our deans to think of new academic programs they could launch. And then they're having college level discussions with their faculty, with their department chairs on how to do that. So combining a virtual event with meaningful follow-up. And so my question to you is, given that many individuals have gone 2 years without attending an external event in person, how are you addressing that gap? Next strategy. Forge external partnerships in a new way. And certainly while COVID's restricted travel, I think in some ways that's actually created new opportunities. Just having, for example, this webinar, right, with over 500 registrants, something that probably would not have happened 2 years ago. And I have to admit, this sounds a little counterintuitive, but to me, this is the perfect time to consider new international partnerships, because no one's traveling, right? So we're kind of all where we are. So our university, for instance, we've started a new strategic partnership with 2 universities in Scotland on rural health. We had a virtual symposia this fall, followed up by meaningful interaction where we're funding some pilot projects. It's also an opportunity for you to look at online education. I know that the pharmacy school that I was previously dean of has now 4 online master's programs that are really growing in scope and enrollment. And finally, I think, sometimes I think, it is a balance for sure, but, in some ways, the pandemic actually is a perfect time to think about creating new things. And if you think about things that in life that are rewarding, it's often developing new programs. And I would argue if you're not growing, then you're rotting. Next slide. So strategy 8, carve out strategic thinking time. And this was advice I received just over a year ago when I became a provost, from other provosts and university presidents and chiefs of staff. If you look at principles of time management, it's often the things that are important but not urgent that really suffer, particularly during a crisis. Things like exercising, eating right, and strategic thinking. I take 1 day a month. It's usually the first Wednesday of every month. I have it blocked off. I have an Excel spreadsheet with kind of strategic initiatives. It's actually my favorite day of the month. I have no meetings that month. I really don't check email. I just focus on those strategic things. A colleague of mine who recently became a provost, we spent some time together. I've called him Ali here, and he took my advice. And actually, he carves out every Friday, which is remarkable for strategic thinking time. So it's your opportunity to really get away from the day-to-day race. I know not all of us are in positions where you can carve out an entire day, but at least carving out some time. My questions to you is, when is your strategic thinking time? How can you hold on to that so it doesn't get consumed by urgent crises? Next slide, please. We're almost just two more left. We're almost done. Intentionally strive to build morale and engagement. I think we've heard the rationale from that from the previous 2 speakers. Your teams need that more than ever before. So some ways that we've done that, we've done some fun things at our university, like creating a university tartan and celebrating that. I've given out about 70 to 80 chocolate bars at this point, with personal notes to individuals around campus. I also, as I toured the different parts of the campus, those units kind of got in a competition who could have show the best time to me, and it was a lot of fun. And also checking individually with your faculty. Before I left as Dean of the University of Cincinnati, I did this twice. I had personal check-ins twice with each faculty and each staff just to see how they're doing. So the question is, which activities could you launch in your college organization to build morale and engagement? And the last strategy, number 10, is reflect on your values, needs, and legacy. I'm not going to read the slide in totality, but I think, again, if you think back to the Great Resignation, a lot of people are reassessing their values, their work-life balance. This is a perfect time, I think, as a leader, if you're a dean or a department chair listening to this, for you to reflect on that too and how it balances with your career. So going to my very last slide, which is the wrap-up, is these kind of take-home points. The next slide, please. I would say it is possible for deans and other leaders to thrive, not merely survive. I would say, yes, it's easy to get overwhelmed with the challenges, but I think these strategies, if you enact them, will help you. And certainly my personal desire for each one of you that are listening right now is that you have a fulfilling career, and a career that perhaps you can look back and say actually got better, was strengthened during the pandemic. So with that, I think I'll end it and turn it back over to our moderators.
Wow, excellent presentation. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Lots of great strategies there to implement. Truly, truly appreciate that. Nilhan, do we have any questions for Provost McKinnon, please?
I'll pick one of the questions. In the meantime, perhaps other speakers can pick up the remaining questions. So, Neil, thank you very much for this insightful presentation and great initiatives. One of our participants has asked, while taking these initiatives with academics and other academic leaders, with the faculty staff, it also, one of our participants asked whether these initiatives would add extra time pressure on the existing responsibilities. So how this was managed, how they have willingness to engage with these initiatives while also they have their day-to-day pressures and activities.
No, that is a fantastic question, and you're right. And I don't claim, to know what's the perfect balance. I think a lot of people, I think, Betty in particular kind of really articulated this at the start of, a lot of folks really struggling, and then Ilke's kind of data as well supported that. A lot of folks are just in survival mode, right? So you could say this is not the time to add more onto it. I think, to me, though, if you think of the things that really, why did you choose those that are listening to this, why did you choose a career in academia? Part of it was probably you had a passion for that area, right? And so I think part of that, how do you regain that passion during a pandemic? Fun, right? We all want to work with fun people that are doing creative things that are appealing. So how can you continue to have some of those activities? And I would argue, carving out strategic thinking time, to me, it sounds like, okay, that's an add-on. You're maybe saying, Neil, that's crazy. I cannot carve out any more time in my day. You will get so much return on investment from that time. And so, yes, you have to take out extra time to do that. You have to carve out time. But I'm telling you, please try it. Trust me on this. Carve out strategic thinking time, and it will pay so many dividends down the road.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Nilhan. Do we have time for one more question, perhaps, before we wrap up, or should we go ahead and close out?
Maybe we may continue with closing, as we are 10 minutes ahead of our time.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Again, thank you so much to all our presenters, Betty, Ilke, and Neil. We thank you so much for spending the time with us. And I want to thank all our participants for staying to this point. I want to say I'm so grateful, and I want to send a big shout out to all the caretakers of young children who were significantly affected during this pandemic. Majority of those were females, but I know that there are several males as well who had to stay home with the kids to double up as professionals and also as teachers during the pandemic. I wish you strength, and I want to thank you for holding out even for our young ones so that they could also do well. And I want to thank all our leaders and administrators who took the time, like Neil provided examples here, to check in with the people who they supervised, and thanking again all the pharmacists, the community pharmacies that opened and maintained service during this time of the pandemic. It could have been worse. I know it could have been worse, but we thank you for holding out the fort there so that way pharmacists could stay relevant during this times. I'm going to turn it over to our illustrious co-chair. He has a few more comments to wrap us up.
Thank you, Toyi, and thank you, our guest speakers. It's a very, very interesting webinar and presentations. I would like to say that good education needs good educators, and good educators require good and stable mental health, and less stress, more joy, or at least enjoyable stress. Our staff, our faculty, our students, they need our support, our affection, at the top, our action. Leaders, pharmacy leaders should take these issues into considerations, and they should address them, and also take care of these points in their strategic thinking and strategic planning, the mental health and well-being of our staff. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to
Me?
Oscar to close us out. We're practically done. Get your stress toolkits ready, folks, and Just as we have first aid kits, get your stress toolkits ready. I tell my students this all the time. Thank you so much for joining us, and join us at AIM at FIP.org. Oscar, thank you.
Thank you, Toyin, and thank you for these powerful messages. We will wrap up today's episode. I would like to sincerely thank our moderators, speakers, and participants joining us from all around the world. As Toyin said, please contact us from aim@fip.org if you would like to become a member and contribute our activities in 2022. Thank you very much for joining us today. Stay safe and healthy. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.